Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. Today we consider The Sheep Detectives, a 2026 mystery comedy in which an ovine ensemble quite literally cracks a human murder case. I am Alexei, and with me is Priyanka. Together we will approach this film as a cultural object and as a technical achievement, with an eye to how it reframes grief, memory, and family within the logic of a cozy whodunit.
Hi, I am Priyanka. I am excited and also kind of amused because how often do we get to say the detectives are sheep? Yes. Let's talk about why that works so well and what it tells us about audiences right now.
To frame our discussion, a layperson's definition first. The Sheep Detectives is a family-friendly mystery set in the English village of Denbrook, where a flock investigates the death of their shepherd George Hardy. The tone is gentle and comic, but the plotting is genuinely deductive. Blue and green stains on George's hands become the decisive clue, and the sheep quietly steer the human constable toward the truth.
In more technical terms, we are looking at a hybrid production. Live-action locations in Buckinghamshire, Hertfordshire, Oxfordshire and Surrey are blended with digitally animated sheep that behave believably. Framestore and Clear Angle Studios provide the VFX, and the result keeps animal motion natural while still expressing thought. It is adapted from Leonie Swan's 2005 novel Three Bags Full, with a screenplay by Craig Mazin and direction by Kyle Boulder.
It's important to understand the production grammar. The camera situates us in hedgerows and farm tracks, while animation modulates eye, ear, and wool subtleties, so the flock can register grief, curiosity, and suspicion without breaking plausibility. Mazin's script calibrates this to support a mystery that can be followed by children, yet respected by adults. Christoph Beck's score ties the tonal fabric together, and a remixed "I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles" in the end credits provides a buoyant exit velocity.
Why does this matter beyond the gimmick? The film makes memory and grief discussable. The sheep believe death turns them into clouds, and many can will themselves to forget sad events. Mopple cannot forget anything, and Lily decides to stop forgetting. I think families get a language for loss that is gentle, and the mystery structure makes it feel purposeful rather than merely sad.
Historically, this project challenges a human-centric norm in detective fiction. We might invoke Babe as a tonal precedent and Murder, She Wrote as a structural cousin. But here observation is literally animal, which reorients what counts as a clue. Hoof paint on a jail floor, a dog's menace, the taste of berries, and a color shift from blue to green because of hair dye form an evidence ecology that is tactile and legible without laboratory apparatus. Turning now to reception and box office. The film opened domestically in May 2026 via Amazon MGM Studios, with Sony Pictures Releasing International handling territories abroad. It earned an A- cinema score and a post-track reading showing 75% definitely recommend. Critics largely praised the sheep-focused sequences and the voice performances, noting that certain human side detours were comparatively weaker. Worldwide gross ultimately reached about $126 million, roughly 65 million domestic and 61 million international.
Chronologically, development was announced in March 2024 under the working title Three Bags Full, with Hugh Jackman and Emma Thompson attached. Kyle Boulder and Craig Mazin were confirmed in June 2024, and principal photography ran June through July 2024 across those English counties. The title changed to The Sheep Detectives in October 2025, and the release moved to May 2026 to align with Mother's Day weekend. Previews were in early May 2026. Opening day took in about 4 million, including just over 1 million in Thursday previews. And then there were strong holds into Memorial Day. Streaming arrived on Prime Video in June 2026, which fit Amazon's hybrid strategy.
Turning to the cast, the live-action ensemble includes Hugh Jackman as George, whose warmth anchors the flock's devotion despite his early death. Emma Thompson as a dryly funny solicitor, Nicholas Braun as an endearingly clumsy constable, and Nicholas Galitzine as Elliot, the narrative face of deceit. The voice cast is remarkably calibrated, with Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Lily, Chris O'Dowd as Mopple, Bryan Cranston as Sebastian, Regina Hall, Patrick Stewart, Bella Ramsey, Rhys Darby, and Brett Goldstein, among others. Reviewers repeatedly singled out the sheep voices as the film's emotional engine. A brief personal note. When I was a child, my grandmother would pause halfway through a detective story and ask me to restate the facts from memory. Inevitably, I forgot a trivial-seeming color or a misplaced glove. The exercise taught me that memory is an ethical practice in investigation, not a mere storage function. This film dramatizes that lesson by making forgetting both a comfort and a liability, which brings us to our core questions.
So, I think the 3 questions we can explore are these. First, how does the film reinterpret Leonie Swan's source material? Second, what if Mopple did not remember everything? Third, how do films like this shift how we talk about family today?
Let's start with the history. Adaptation is always an act of selection. Mazin has said he pursued the rights for nearly a decade, drawn to the novel's smart, moving, philosophical qualities. The film preserves the sheep as detectives and the reflective core about memory and loss, but it reshapes tone toward broad family accessibility. Structurally, it clarifies the central clue chain, foregrounding the Orff medicine and hair dye color mixing, so that the deduction is visual and teachable.
Can we say that the changes mostly simplify without dumbing down? Like, the idea that one hand turns green because blue medicine mixes with blonde dye is both funny and logical. And it gives the constable a concrete way to catch up with the sheep. I am curious how that affects audience perception of the animals versus the humans.
We observe a redistribution of agency. The sheep remain the primary solvers, nudging the human police toward synthesis, while the human subplots provide social texture and misdirection. By tightening the clue mechanics and concentrating emotional beats on Lily's choice to remember, the adaptation invites families to track both the case and the coping. In simpler terms, the film trims esoterica to keep children oriented while trusting adults to read grief in the margins. That balance, plus the expressive VFX, explains why the sheep sequences drew the strongest praise.
So yeah, moving on, the counterfactual. What if Mopple did not remember everything? The flock can choose to forget, which is soothing, but also risky. If nobody retained the timeline and the small clues, how would the investigation function?
Theoretically, the narrative would pivot from deduction to contingency. Without Mopple's perfect recall, the flock's collective knowledge becomes volatile. Key facts could evaporate at moments of fear, such as the dog attack or the butcher's approach. The planted bangle, the berry residue, and the green hand would no longer cohere into a pattern. And Elliot's disguise as Peter Van Vieren under another name could hold longer. Tim, the constable, might still stumble toward the color clue, but he would lack the quiet corroborations the sheep provide. Rebecca's frame-up could plausibly succeed, at least temporarily.
I think the next thing we should talk about is how the stakes change. Without Mopple, would the Winter Lamb's jail message or Reggie and Ronnie's car ramming become the main turning points? Like, would action replace memory as the saving force?
Precisely. The dramaturgy would depend more on spectacle and chance. The Winter Lamb's hoof-painted message could function as an accidental archive, and the twin rams' disabling of Peter's car would become not a comic payoff, but an essential deus ex ovina. Thematically, the film would lose its most elegant metaphor, namely that remembrance is a moral choice. By contrast with Mopple present, memory itself is the hero, and Sebastian's sacrificial arc catalyzes Lily's refusal to forget, which then orders the clues into meaning. In conclusion, Mopple's recall is not a quirk, but the film's epistemic backbone.
To shift gears a bit, the open question today is family. We have George's lost twins, Rebecca's arrival, the forged will, and then the adoption of the winter lamb who becomes George. How do films like this change how audiences talk about what family is?
It is worth noting that the film aligns legal, biological, and chosen bonds, and then tests them under stress. Rebecca claims her father's surname and stewardship of the meadow, which is a legal and symbolic repair. Lily adopts the winter lamb and names him George, which reframes protection and lineage as acts of care, not merely blood. The French-speaking sheep's rescue expands the flock beyond borders, literalizing hospitality. Audiences encounter a model in which family is constituted by remembrance, responsibility, and refuge. And the streaming window likely extended those conversations into living rooms where mixed generations watched together.
I am curious about the broader impact. Do we have enough evidence yet to say these portrayals meaningfully shift real family conversations about adoption or grief? Or is it more that they give a safe entry point, like a story you can reference at the dinner table without making it too heavy?
Arguably, we require more longitudinal data. One could study post-viewing parent-child dialogues, track how often children reference clouds and remembering when discussing loss, and compare cross-cultural reception about inheritance ethics. Additionally, we might examine whether animal protagonists increase empathy for real-world animal welfare, an avenue hinted by the SPCA clause in the older will. For now, we can infer that the film lowers the barrier to discussing difficult topics by embedding them in a solvable puzzle with a hopeful cadence, punctuated by a familiar pop chorus that signals we have made it through together.
Building on that, I also think it matters that Hugh Jackman's George remains present in memory and, briefly, as a ghostly hint. It makes me wonder how small supernatural gestures can support children's reasoning without promising magic solutions. Maybe that is another research angle.
Speaking of reasoning, let us not neglect the efficient villain construction. Elliot Matthews is revealed as Peter Van Vuren, the son, who dyes his hair blonde, forges a will, and exploits succession logic, so that Rebecca's conviction would default inheritance to him. The color mixing clue, blue orf medicine with blonde dye turning a hand green, is elegantly low-tech. Reggie and Ronnie's timely intervention closes the loop with ovine slapstick, and Tim's arc from bumbling to perceptive is supported, not supplanted, by the flock's nudges.
Isn't it interesting how critics notice the village cutaways sometimes slow momentum? I guess that is because, compared to the sheep, the humans are just less novel here. But I also liked Emma Thompson's dry humour at the will reading, which keeps the legal stakes sharp while still being playful.
Clearly, the center of gravity remains with Lily, Mopple, and Sebastian. Cranston's gravitas lets Sebastian's sacrifice register as meaningful rather than manipulative, and Louis Dreyfus threads wit with ache, which is not trivial when the character isn't you. O'Dowd's Mopple provides both comedy and conscience. In this context, VFX is not spectacle, but an instrument of characterization, which is why the animals feel alive rather than merely cute.
Maybe one last practical note about distribution. Opening against an action sequel and a music event, the film positioned itself for families and then quickly went to Prime Video. That seems like a smart way to convert word of mouth while schools were nearing summer breaks.
To summarize, The Sheep Detectives is a hybrid mystery comedy in which sheep investigate their shepherd's murder, and in doing so, they convert forgetting and remembering into a family conversation about grief. We asked how the adaptation reinterprets the novel, concluded that it streamlines for accessibility without losing philosophical texture. We tested a counterfactual about Mopple's memory and saw that the film's moral architecture depends on it. And we opened a question about evolving family dynamics that invites further research across reception studies and ethics.
For further study, I think we can look at animals in storytelling more broadly, from Babe to newer hybrids, and track when animal perspective clarifies human concerns. So, I guess that kind of sums it up. Thank you for listening.
This concludes our lecture for today. Be well, remember kindly, and we will see you next time.